your childhood had the original trilogy in it. You had the best childhood there could have been.
All right, welcome everyone to this BTB short, the state of Star Wars, where four self-professed Star Wars nerds talk about what else? Star Wars. Before we get started, just a reminder, we're part of the SPDM Podcast Network. You can check out our main cast, the BTB Movie Club, along with a ton of other great podcasts wherever you listen and download your podcasts. My name is Matt Smith, and I'm joined by Aaron Lashbrook,
Hello.
Brian Larson,
How you doing?
and the T in BTB, Tim Larson.
Good to see you guys.
All
Why
right.
did I wave?
I don't know. And
Yeah.
I'm
after
not
the
sure.
last time, I really
Well, I
wanted to
said
go
good to
with
see you guys. I don't. If we're waving at them, we might as well say hi.
I wanted to go with a hello there.
Oh, you missed a
Nobody
great
has.
opportunity. We missed it.
Yeah.
Just before we get started, spoiler warning, we will be talking about Star Wars, both past, present, and future, talking about characters, plots, locations, movies, shows, etc. So please note that this is your warning. If you haven't seen Star Wars, there are spoilers ahead. All right, so we are here to talk about Star Wars movies. Everybody think they're up for that?
Yeah, all day long.
I got a bad feeling about this.
All right, so we'll start with an easy one. What is your favorite original trilogy Star Wars movie? Aaron.
Empire Strikes Back. Thank you for asking. I think we covered it in the last episode. For me, it was the first one I was at the theater. It was my first experience with Star Wars the way it was supposed to be, and to this day, it's the best. The conflict, the darkness of it. I loved all of it.
All right, Brian.
Return of the Jedi. I enjoyed the finale of it. Luke
Blasphemy.
not being a whiny anymore.
There's
Darth
a Clerks
Vader.
reference for everybody.
So, I just enjoyed that one the most. And who doesn't love Ewoks?
There, we got through a whole episode without talking about Ewoks last time. I'm impressed. Tim, what's your favorite OT movie?
As a kid, it was definitely Return of the Jedi for all the reasons Brian just said. And then growing up and looking back, Empire Strikes Back is, it's acclaimed as the best one of all of them, and it really is for the reasons Aaron just said. So I'm gonna push right through the middle of that.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm an Empire fan. It's always been my favorite. Even though I started, as I mentioned before, with Return of the Jedi, Empire just had everything. It had the big reveal, kind of had that darkness to it. Just sort of it was different, right? Everything wasn't hunky dory at the end. So I just
The black
love
guy.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, honestly, that it's a half a joke, but having what's Billy D. Williams having him
Mhm.
show up was a big draw.
Sure.
Like
For sure.
making a main character an African American character was kind of a big deal.
Yep. Yeah. And bounty
Darth
hunters.
Vader's a black guy.
Well, that's not okay. Make a mark there. 4 minutes in, that's all it took. All right. Anyway, what about non-original trilogy? Not do we want to go prequel, or do we just want to open it up to everything that's not original trilogy? Do I need to to make you pick a prequel?
You trying to
I
force
don't-
somebody to pick a prequel?
I wouldn't go as a favorite, but I liked the prequels. I'm
Yeah.
the one.
No, there's more than you, Brian.
It was enjoyable. People was like, and that comes to the madness that comes along with some Star Wars fans that they wanted to pick it apart and this
Mhm.
that and Anakin as a kid and how could he be with Amidala? There's too much of an age difference and blah blah what all the things. It was enjoyable movies and Qui-Gon Jinn as a character and I didn't even Jar Jar didn't piss me off the way it did some people. It was and there's parts of it that were enjoyable. Now to compare him to Chewbacca, that's blasphemy.
Sure.
But there was something to like and take away from each of those movies that were enjoyable. And the fight scene on the See, you guys do much better with the names of planets
Mhm.
and such. Um,
Attack of the
when
Clones. You're talking about in Attack of the
yeah,
Clones.
at the end,
Hmm.
and Amidala gets her shirt ripped, and we see Belly.
Geonosis.
But that whole fight scene is just really well done. And then we got Mace Windu cutting Jango Fett's head off, and
Hmm.
I mean, all these things that happen during these movies that culminate into a good finale of a movie that none of us ever thought was going to get made. I mean, we didn't think we thought they'd continue 7, 8, 9, not, oh, we're going to do 1, 2, 3. So that's my thoughts.
I'm pretty close to Brian. I do not have a problem with those prequels. I will say this: I don't like any of them as much as I like any of the originals. You
Sure.
know, like those are just kind of untouchable, really. Um, but there are parts of each one of those movies that are kind of cringy as far as how much I like the movie, you know, and Jar Jar Binks is one of them. The first half of Attack of the Clones, where they're establishing that Obi-Wan is, for lack of a better term, busting Hayden Christensen's balls, you know, Anakin's balls. It just seemed, some of it seemed forced just because you know where it's going. You know, in the original trilogy, you don't know where it's going. In the prequels, you do, and that forced the movie writing, and some of it was awkward. However, having said that, I liked them. I know the fandom that you talked about in the last episode was just like people over entitled and having too much ownership as a fan of the movie, complaining that you ruined my childhood by making these movies. Like, hey, just buy the ticket and watch it or don't, you know? And for my part, I liked them. I would definitely put them in the category of things that I enjoyed watching multiple times. They're not as good as the original.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with both of you. I think you had twofold problems, right? You had 20, what was it, 99 for Phantom Menace? Aaron probably knows this.
99? Yep.
99. So you had 26, not 26, I can do math, 16 years of rabid fandom, as I mentioned in the last episode, right? You have books, you have video games, you have comics, you have people just pouring into this world and this extended universe, and then you had to sort of try to meet their expectations, which is hard. And also you have to battle the other fold of the twofold is you had to battle, well, we already know what's going to happen. We
Mhm.
know this kid becomes Darth Vader. We know, that there's this, uh, we know what's going to happen to him. He's going to live, blah, blah, blah. We don't know any of the other characters. So they had some room to play around with. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't hate them. I think Revenge of the Sith, the end of that movie is one of the best scenes in Star Wars or fight scenes and
Mhm.
everything. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I never hated them. And I'm not a. I love Star Wars. I love the shows, the movies, and the shows. Um, I don't get the watching something to hate it, or what it seems like. It's almost, especially with the prequel trilogy, for some reason, especially after Attack of the Clones. So it was like some people had buyer's remorse or something like that. I think that's when you really started hearing what Tim's, you ruined my childhood, and it's like, how soft are you
Right.
that,
Right.
Your childhood's fine.
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um your childhood had the original trilogy in it,
Right.
you had the best childhood there could have been.
Right.
Um but so I think for those people, and so being a late Gen Xer, a young Gen Xer, the end of the Gen, so there were people who are in my generation who were 10, 11, 12 when the first movies came out. I'm still part of that group of people. So they were a lot older than me. I didn't, like I said, hadn't seen A New Hope in the theaters. Um, so they were much older than me when these movies started coming out. So you were talking about 16 years between Return of the Jedi and the start of the prequel trilogy. Those people were, lack of a better term, much more mature. You know, they were older, and for whatever reason, I don't know if they just lost the love of Star Wars or they lost the hey, this is supposed to be fun. Go there and have a good time. You know, picking it apart and just, you know, all over it. And like I said, I don't think a lot of that started until after Attack of the Clones. They kind of gave Phantom Menace a pass. They're like, okay, it wasn't great, but we see what they're setting up, and then it's like, oh no, this is all garbage. Everything, you know, and it's the same people. Anything Disney does now, you know, it's gonna be garbage. You know, thumbs down, whatever they got to do. But I loved it all. I loved the era that it came out in. So 99, right? We said that's Phantom Menace.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, still we're in kind of the down, I don't want to say downfall, the end of MTV, but MTV was still a big thing. We still had TRL. We still had, so what I remember is whoever did the mix, and I want to say they played it on MTV, where they put Kid Rock's Ba with the Ba with the entrance of Darth Maul. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And it's the movie's not even out yet. And I, you know, I'm going to see it and I'm going to love it. And I don't care really what happens. But it was a whole different buildup. We had talked in the previous episode about how, like, the buildup of Empire Strikes Back coming out, there was more TV commercials, there was more, you know, A New Hope was already a huge success. For Return of the Jedi, it was ridiculous.
Right.
You know, everybody knew it was coming out. Everybody was for this movie. I was so anticipating it. I don't think it could have let me down. And I don't, you know, like we said here, I don't know. It seems like we're 4 for 4 for not hating it, but it seems like a lot of people hate it. It's kind of like Nickelback. You know, everybody hates them, but they sell out arenas.
Right.
Right.
So,
but to answer your original question, Matt, Rogue One would be my favorite non-trilogy movie. So we went off on a tangent, but your
That's okay.
question actually
That's
was,
okay.
what was your favorite?
somehow we stuck to the original trilogy, and I
Yeah.
thought we were hammering that one out because that's where it seemed like we were going.
Yeah, I think Rogue One was just a phenomenal
Did you just
movie.
want to say Rogue One before I said it? Because that's what I was going to sum up with.
Yeah.
Because
before
I
we-
like Solo. Suck
Before
it.
we leave the
No.
prequels,
I do. I like Solo. I like
before
it
we
all.
leave the prequels, the guys, my bandmates talk about Star Wars a lot too, and one comment in particular that's always resonated with me, my friend Tony got this from a podcast that he watched at one point. Somebody asked, "Who's the protagonist in the Phantom Menace that I'm supposed to be rooting for?" So you can look at the original trilogy and that first movie, it's clearly Luke Skywalker. And you could probably say that goes through all three movies, but then it grows into a band, a small group that you're rooting for. Where in that first movie, I think if anybody's going to critique it, it is it Anakin? Because are you really rooting for Darth Vader in that movie? Is it Obi-Wan? Is it Padme? You know, like there's a decent argument to be made there. However, I don't have a problem with it. Knowing how Star Wars works with groups of people, I don't have a problem with it starting out as a group of people, and I that's never bothered me. But I think that's one of the things that's a deterrent for a lot of people.
Well, I get what you're saying, and I don't. So the group has become Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin. So that's your original group.
Right.
You know, that's Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie. You know, that's who we're rooting for. I don't get where the I don't understand who the protagonist is question.
Yeah.
Aaron believes Tony is dumb.
Again, it wasn't Tony's idea. He just brought it up from a podcast he'd heard. I also like Rogue One.
All right. So I'm gonna stick on the sorry, I'm gonna stick on the prequels because I
Yeah.
want to like I think we all know or we all have said like they weren't the worst thing that happened. There's a lot of reasons, expectations, whatever. What could they have done a little bit? Do we think they could have done things better? I'm sure we do. Like, is there anything? I know it's a kind of a vague question, but
We're like Friday afternoon quarterbacking here.
right, yeah, for sure.
Are
Going
we
back that
are
many
we
years.
going Phantom Menace or are we going original
Just
trilogy? Like,
just prequels in general. What before we get
so,
onto the other
yeah,
stuff, like
prequel
what
trilogy.
is there something we think like we liked them or liked them enough, right? We don't think they're better than the original trilogy, but is there anything looking back now, 25 years later, literally, that we think they could have done better as to Tim's point, Friday afternoon?
There are parts of them that are heads and shoulders better than the original trilogy.
Sure.
Like the cinematography, music is pretty much the same.
Right.
So I would say it's on par. The special effects
Oh yeah.
blow it out of the water.
Mhm.
And, we kind of talked a little bit about it, and it comes up from time to time. Freddie Prinze Jr. has an interview where he's talking about, these are for kids and, it's not wrecking your childhood, which I agree with, but, these movies are made for kids. What they were doing at ILM with the miniatures and how they weren't making a movie for kids. And I disagree with them on that. If anything, I'll give you, they were making a movie for younger people and trying to keep their parents, but these aren't kid movies.
Mhm.
So I disagree with that, meme or clip that comes up over and over of Freddie Prinze saying that and trying to not really shit on, but just defend, or kind of push back on people who the you wreck my childhood people. Um, but there are things that are, like I said, heads and shoulders better in the prequel trilogy compared to the original. And, a lot of it has to do with technology, and that's maybe not a fair comparison, but it's better.
Yep.
There's better aliens, there's better ships, there's better, all of it, all that kind of stuff is better. And if you can't say there's nothing better about, well, then you don't like the story, and you just like to argue with people.
Well, I'll give you two things, Matt, that bothered me that I think would be better. Um, the Darth Maul was just, I mean, the word menace is perfect for titling that movie. I mean, he was an outstanding unknown entity character. Just as good as when Darth Vader first shows up and you learn about the dark side of the Force, like in that small time you meet him. They killed him off so quick, and I know why they did that. Show Obi-Wan as one of the greatest Jedi ever to be able to pull that off. But maybe Obi-Wan just, cuts off a leg or something, and then you could still have Darth Maul have an exit in the second movie, and the reason why, Darth Sidious needs to pick somebody else. Also, I think you could have come up with a better angst in between Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's just annoying watching this whole father and son thing, where they're bickering constantly. And so I would have enjoyed it better if they were doing things together and there was this camaraderie, but because of Anakin's attachment to Padme, perhaps Obi-Wan's making the right decision that Anakin doesn't agree with, and there's an incident that kind of turns him abruptly, as opposed to this sort of annoyance thing. That always irks me in that movie, the first half of Attack of the Clones. So there's two things I would do differently, and I would make the moment where Anakin really starts to turn away from Obi-Wan being something that's a personal connection for Anakin, as opposed to that annoyance buildup. It was just hard to watch. Maybe
Yeah,
that made it good, but for me that was hard to watch.
sure. And to your point, we'll talk about TV at some other point, but they did give Darth Maul a little
Right.
a chance again in some TV and in a different movie and things like that. So they did realize that I think they screwed up there and they should have tried to do that differently. But
And just going along those lines real quick, you know, uh, talking about George Lucas and how, maybe there weren't like a lot of the best decisions made when he wanted to make them, but there were corrections made. Like Tarkin was supposed to be the bad guy. In A New Hope, he was going to be the main bad guy, the main
An
antagonist,
emperor, so to speak. Yeah.
right. Yeah, the one that was the main puppet or whatever, and then it was like, oh, well, we got this Darth Vader guy. So it's almost like they caught that quicker than they
right,
did with Darth
right.
Maul, but they made the same mistake twice.
Right.
So I don't know. That was always a weird thing that I thought that, how is Admiral Tarkin supposed to be the evil, sinister guy when you got
Yeah,
Darth Vader?
yeah,
Well, yeah, because Leia even says like some about him holding Vader's leash.
yeah.
Right. So there's a suggestion that he's more in charge of things than yeah, which is strange.
And that changes and gets, retconned over time. But,
Mhm.
in that first movie,
Does it become canon?
all of it.
It's all canon.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
sorry.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it does. There's some novelization and comic stuff that explains that away a little bit too, as they are very good at doing at Disney/Star Wars/Lucasfilm. They can explain anything if you give them long enough. Um, okay, so Tim's Rogue One, Brian's Rogue One, I'm Rogue One. Aaron, what are you?
That's not
Don't do it.
fair.
Don't do it. Don't you dare do it.
Just be honest, Aaron. We're here. We're in the nest.
Well, no,
There's only
Rogue
one
One
other
is amazing. Rogue One is
Yeah.
one of the best things that's ever come out of Star
It's
Wars.
literally okay
Like,
for us
agreed.
all to like that movie.
Or as
By the way.
pigeonholed as they were and what they had to work with. All right, so you get from here to here.
Yeah.
Let's see what you can do. And they're
Right.
like, watch this.
Oh, and by the way, nobody can survive.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm
So-
saying. It's like you're pigeonholed and you've got, 6 weeks of time in the Star Wars timeline to work
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
Go.
So
I-
two things
Does
about
Rogue
that.
One work? I'm sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Does Rogue One, without the ending and Vader showing up, is it the greatest one though?
It's still up there,
I
man.
think that's the cherry on top.
It's-
I think that's the cherry on top of it. I think it was
yeah.
Was Vader? Was that Brian? Did they add that? Was that something they added or wasn't in the original script? Do you remember?
I don't believe they added it. No,
Okay.
because they went into great detail on how they wanted to have Vader not show any he didn't use any parts of the Force or do anything different that he had already been doing in the movies.
Yeah.
So they wanted to make sure that they used him the same as he had been. But then the argument is, I've never seen Vader hold somebody in the air and slice them.
Right.
So
Yeah, they took some liberty with that for sure.
But he didn't
He's
use
held
like
people.
force lightning or he didn't,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
He didn't do any flips, in air. Although
Right.
we've seen him do that in the prequels, I guess.
I haven't been in very many movies where people screamed or as a group. And when he lit that lightsaber, that whole theater went,
Yeah.
so yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
no,
play it all around.
that scene from start to finish is from when he's backlit, like you were saying, to walking down and seeing how terrified all the guys were, and then launch, and it's Leia's ship that gets caught by the Star Destroyer, and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, they
tied it all
they
together.
did it.
Yep. So I watched this a long time ago now. I don't maybe at the end of Rogue One, maybe it's on the DVD, an interview about how it was made. And the guy who's kind of credited with selling the idea or starting to write it worked on, I don't know, like Return of the Jedi back in the day, or maybe it was a prequel. And he took his son, 16-year-old son, with him to work to kind of work on stuff. I'm totally making this up from watching this several years ago, so my facts are probably off a little bit. But he and his son came up with the idea of a movie that would span these two things, and told Kathleen, what's her name,
Kennedy.
uh, Kennedy, and she gave the green light on it at that time. And I think the timing of releasing that movie was perfect, and the marketing was perfect, because I don't remember seeing any commercials about Darth Vader, but I do remember seeing a little bit about where we were going, and like a scene of putting the Death Star together finally. And I remember seeing a commercial with AT-AT walkers in the jungle, and I was like, holy, this looks amazing. So they kept, just like they kept the big reveal in Empire out of the marketing, they kept Darth Vader out of the marketing, which was just awesome.
Well, and the one of the points of the whole movie was to retcon, or make canon why that exhaust port was there that they could use.
Mhm.
So whether that was part of their original, hey, we can work this into, it was just something that came up, and it was I think a really good fix for the critics or the crybabies or the
Mhm.
whatever, like, who,
Family
well,
Guy.
why would they do that? Well, how do you know how a space station works? I don't.
Yeah. But, we talked earlier about the prequels trying to almost like square peg and round hole. Like, they had to end the prequels in a certain spot. And this movie had to end in a certain spot. And I think this movie did a better job than the prequels did of
Yep,
filling that gap.
for sure. For sure. So,
But just to push back on that, they
Sure.
had, maybe if it even was a main goal, say the exhaust port was their main goal and they plugged that hole. Um, the prequel trilogy had a whole lot more to try to explain or
True.
introduce,
True.
so I think there was a lot there. So I don't think that's totally a fair comparison, because they were like, you can't step on the toes here and you can't step on the toes here, but anything in
Yeah.
between, go nuts,
Yeah.
because all
Yeah.
these people are going to die. There was people like Anakin, Obi-Wan, they had to make it through all three movies. I think there were more hoops to jump through. So I don't know if that's 100% fair comparison.
I I feel like though the prequels had three movies to get you from here's Anakin as a child to here's Anakin as Darth Vader. And really, what did they need? They needed Yoda, Obi-Wan, Anakin. That's basically it. Now they threw R2D2 and C3PO in there for
And a
funskies.
and a set of Clone Wars.
Well, right, but like they took the one, right, this is the big internet meme. They took the one line of the movie in New Hope and they turned it into a three movie trilogy. I
Right.
think they still had some freedom there. Like I don't know what the Clone Wars meant. They could have done anything they wanted.
I think they
Yeah.
had a ton of freedom. They also had, like you just said, three movies to fill
True.
without anything up,
True.
which is, different from, we know the first 10 minutes, we know the last 10 minutes, you've got, an hour and a half.
Yeah.
They had to do 6 hours of these things, these beats have to be hit, and you can't really, and they made up a whole lot of lore, and I think it was great. The Clone Wars and the Geonosian, factories and all that. Awesome. I don't even mind the political, talking about economy and
Sure.
how that affects
Yeah.
trade and blockades, and I was fine with all of it. But
The Senate, all that stuff. We knew when we were kids there were 9 movies. I remember hearing that way back in the
Yeah.
day, and it'd be very interesting to hear a story about what George Lucas originally had intended for episodes 1, 2, and 3 versus what they ended up being. That would be a really fun conversation to hear him tell around a campfire. You know what I mean?
Right.
right, and there are certain things that, you know little things like the Ewoks were supposed to be Wookiees,
Right.
but he never knew that third movie was going to get made, so he wanted to make sure they, like, a Wookiee was in the first movie. So there was compromises, and you have no idea. And he's not super consistent with his stories either about what happened when
Right.
and where and
Sure.
why, and you know
His first
I
wife's not around to
remember
talk to her.
as a kid. Well, you know what? Never mind. We'll talk about it later. I'm sure we're going to get into memorabilia and collectors down the road.
Yeah.
So collection stuff. So I'll get into it then.
Okay.
But
Okay. So we obviously all have a love affair with Rogue One. So the other non or newer movies, I would say. So we have Solo. Technically, we have to include the Clone Wars animated movie, which some would argue was just the starter of the series, which is a great series, but that's we could talk about that some other time. But so you got your animated movie, you got Solo, which has sort of gotten a bad rap, I think, and then obviously you have the sequel trilogy, um, for what it's worth. So out of those movies, what what did we what did they do right? Did they do anything right? So we're not talking about Rogue One because we all know they did that one like the perfect Star Wars movie, clearly. Apparently. So all these other ones, what did we do right? And we probably don't even need to talk about the Clone Wars one because that was more of just to set up the TV show, but what did they do right with these? Did they do anything right?
Oh, I like Solo. I've watched it several times. I've got no gripe with it. Um, I like the feel of the entire Star Wars ness of it.
Mhm.
I think the cast was great. Um, I know it's not Harrison Ford, but I'd rather have, and I don't know the actor's name, I'd rather have him do the job than them CGI Harrison Ford's face, which
Yeah.
Right.
that wasn't even a thing. I don't think they were even attempting at that time. They did Rogue One came out before, so they had done Carrie Fisher's face, and I think they did a little with Tarkin in that movie too, and it
Yes.
wasn't
Peter
great.
Cushing. Yeah.
Um, so, but
Alden Ehrenreich, by the way. Alden Ehrenreich.
oh,
Something.
that's the guy who played Solo.
Yeah.
That
He
doesn't
was
even
also in
sound.
Oppenheimer.
Oh, which I haven't seen yet. Which maybe we should for the other group.
Yeah,
Um,
see that. It's great.
but yeah, I liked the heist um,
Mhm.
aspect of it. I like the uh, oh, it's not the Black Hand because that's from Black Sun
Black
because
Sun.
that's
Yeah.
where we find out that Darth Maul. This is where we see Darth Maul
Yeah.
in live action again. That whole aspect of the criminal underground and the
Crimson Dawn is
Crimson Dawn.
that's what they call it in that movie.
That's
There is a Black Sun too. There's a Syndicate, there's a Sun, and then there's a
yeah.
Dawn. So those are all I'm getting them all mixed up too, but those are all in there somewhere.
Okay.
Pike Syndicate, the Pike Syndicate. That's who it
Yep.
is.
Um. Oh,
Bunch of
what was
Star
I gonna?
Wars nerds. We can't think of nerdy Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, so you guys have watched more than I have because you're saying things that aren't in that movie, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
And the freedom fighters that end up screwing up their heist. Whatever nest. It was
Mhm.
something nest.
Yep.
I like that the introduction of that. It's just there's so much other stuff going on in the universe in the Star Wars universe that isn't part of the Luke Skywalker
Right.
or Skywalker um, lineage. So and Childish Gambino.
Yeah.
I
As
mean
Lando.
that's worth the movie right there. But
I don't know if they could have done a better casting job as young Lando. Could they have?
Right. I
I mean,
totally agree with that.
that's pretty dead on.
but
So I'll tell you, I'll go the other side of this about Solo because I also enjoy it, but I think here's what they did, what the miss is on Solo. Han Solo's in just about every scene. The magic of Star Wars, like A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, certainly Return of the Jedi, Lord of the Rings, is you start out with your group and then they end up getting separated. And throughout the movie, you go to different scenes with different groups that comes back together. And in Solo, they never did that. It pretty much is just a linear thing about him and his life. And like Amelia Clark's character, can't remember her name, like she just disappears and then she just shows up later and she's back in. They didn't they didn't find a way to create that dynamic of while this is going on, time passes, and then we catch up with our character later. Um, that just didn't really happen in that movie, and I think that's what makes all of the other movies work.
But
So
in that
if
relationship, it doesn't work if he knows what's happened to her, because
no, I totally
what's
agree.
happened to her is so diabolical. He can't even, imagine
Yes,
who she's become. So
What
yes,
happened
as
to her? No. Sorry.
but as far as a movie watcher, a movie goer, somebody reading the story, that's the thing that's missing. It doesn't have to be her. It could be other characters getting separated, but they didn't do that in that movie, and I think that's a strength of these kind of movies.
my other pushback on that would be no other movie was called, Chewbacca
Right,
or Luke. This
right.
one was called Solo. You know,
True.
Yeah.
it's about him.
And yeah, I think I don't know. I don't remember. This is 2018. Did something happen with the distribution of this? Is that what they claimed was the problem? Do you guys remember?
They had
No,
writer issues, they had director issues, it got
Yeah.
postponed. They had a lot of
Postponed. Yeah.
production issues.
yeah, the original, it was a pair of directors that worked together, and they had made, because it was, who came in to save it.
Richie Cunningham,
Yeah.
Ron Howard.
Opie Cunningham.
Ron Howard.
Yeah.
Ron Howard. Yeah.
Because the original two had shot it like, what'd they call it, like, a buddy cop movie, like, what would be like,
Turner and Hooch.
no, because that's a dog. um
Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid,
Solo Chewbacca. I mean,
Lethal
Sorry.
Weapon.
he's a Wookiee, he's not a dog. I'll let walking carpets
I'm a Mog.
slide. Half
Laugh it
man,
up,
half dog.
fuzzball.
But I was gonna go with Bad Boys. They're
Oh.
both
Oh,
humans.
we would have got there
Oh.
sooner or later. We were getting close.
So they had shot it like Bad Boys, like a funny buddy cop movie.
Huh.
And I don't know who came in and shut it down, probably Disney. And they had to do reshoots, and yeah, it got strung out. And
I'm pulling this out of my ass, but I believe I remember those two dudes having creative differences with Kathleen Kennedy. I think it was her.
yeah,
That
which
could be.
I'm calling her Disney. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she is to Star Wars world. She
Yeah.
is Disney.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I agree with all that. I liked it too. It's not my favorite. It's not one I just go, oh, I'll turn that on. But I thought it was fine. I didn't mind the casting either. I know that's what I heard a lot of people complaining about. It's like, what do you want him to do? Harrison Ford was 70 at the time. He broke his leg.
Right.
Remember, he broke his leg filming the prequel or the sequel trilogy, which it
Yeah,
was after
yeah.
this, right? But geez, let the guy live. He doesn't need to be hopping around like freaking Han Solo all the time.
well, and one of the other things I like about the movie is Woody Harrelson's character. I mean, it's basically the Scorpion and the Toad. At the end when he's like, "I told you who I was when you met
Yep.
me,"
Yep.
and it's like that's kind of cool that they stuck with it.
Mhm.
I don't know.
That one has more of a Western feel, like a Western
Sure.
movie feel. The
They're-
last
yeah,
moment
they're robbing a
shootout
train.
and- yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
literally.
Western feel
Yeah.
for sure.
Hey everyone, this is future editor Matt breaking in to let you know this abrupt ending is because we recorded for a long time and we wanted to break this up a little bit more. So we will continue to talk about the Star Wars movies, the sequel trilogy in our next episode if you can catch us there. Appreciate everybody listening. Just a reminder, we are part of the SPDM podcasting network. You can check out our main cast, the BTB Movie Club there, along with a ton of other podcasts. Thanks for playing along. See you later.